another message in our Witnesses to the Passion series. The Witnesses to the Passion is about the people who were involved in the story of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. This particular one is on Pontius Pilate, and our text is Matthew 27, verses 15 to 25. But I'll also be touching on all the accounts from the Gospels on Pontius Pilate and his encounter with Jesus. This week we're going to look at a much more famous witness to the Passion. Where last week we only had 3 verses, this week's witness has part of at least 5 chapters devoted to him. Our witness today, like I said, is Pontius Pilate. Outside the biblical record, there's not a lot of information on Pilate. His name has 2 possible meanings, one of which involves skill with a javelin, which may mean that he got his position as governor of this area as a result of his skill in the military. But we don't know that for sure. What we do know is Pilate was the 5th governor of the region of Judea under the reign of Tiberius Caesar, and he reigned for about 10 years between 26 and 36 AD approximately, which made him among the longest reigning governors of that area at that time. Now today I'm going to tell you the story as if I were him. And then I have a few things to add. So here starts the story. Here I am, the governor. It seems like a powerful position, and I guess it is, but it's not easy. I was appointed by the emperor, and my main job is keeping the peace and keeping the money rolling into the empire, which is surprisingly difficult in this corner of the world. The Jews are sort of my problem children, and their leaders are the worst. They're just so religious. And most of their problems about things I just don't care about. Like the other day. It was early in the morning. I mean really early. When a bunch of their leaders showed up at my door. They were shouting and they were waiting for me to come out to them. They wouldn't even come into my home. Do you know why? Because they said that would make them unclean. Can you imagine someone saying that to you? I can't come into your house today because contact with you would make me dirty. I'm the governor, for goodness sake. Oh well, heavy is the head that wears the crown. So I went out to them. And it turns out they brought this man to me. They said his name was Jesus. He was already pretty beaten up. Poor guy must have had a rough night. They brought up these charges. We have found this man subverting our nation. He opposes paying taxes to Caesar and claims to be Messiah, a king. Now there's 2 things I know for sure. I don't really care about their religious rules, and they don't really care about Caesar. There was something fishy going on here. There was more to this than meets the eye. Still, if he does claim to be a king, that could be a problem. So I just plain asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He came back to me with, "You have said so." Does he really think this is my idea? I want nothing to do with this mess. But as soon as he spoke, the chief priests and the elders started shouting all kinds of charges at him. Most people would have fought them. Most people would have stood up for themselves and tried to defend their honor. But this Jesus, he didn't say a word. I even asked him if he didn't hear the charges and the testimony they were bringing against him. But he just stood there and didn't say a word. What do you do when the most likable person in the place is the one they're trying to bring up on charges? These religious leaders were up to no good, and I knew it. I don't know what he did to tick them off, but it sure wasn't anything I cared about. Then I thought about it. This guy was innocent. And I told him so. I said, I find no basis for a charge against this man. It's an open and shut case. This should be over. But they just weren't willing to let it go. They said, he stirs up people all over Judea by his teaching. He started in Galilee and has come all the way here. Ha 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 ha. That was when they made their big mistake. They wanted me to do something to this guy, maybe even put him to death. But then they said he was from Galilee. Galilee is not my jurisdiction, not my circus, not my monkeys. I can pass this mess off to Herod. Man, I hated Herod back then. This couldn't have happened to a nicer guy than Herod, right? Let this Jesus be Herod's problem. I thought I was off the hook. And when I got Jesus out of here, the chief priest went right along with him over to Herod. They started the same old mess with Herod over again. Herod said Jesus would not say a word in response. So Herod and the soldiers basically ridiculed Jesus and mocked him. They sent him back to me wrapped in a beautiful purple royal robe. I have to admit that Herod had style. And from that point forward, we became friends. Still, this whole mess with Jesus was back on my doorstep. And so were the chief priests. I called the priests to me and said, you brought me this man as one who is inciting rebellion. I have examined him in your presence and have found no basis for the charges against him. Neither is Herod, for he sent him back to us, as you can see. He's done nothing to deserve death. Therefore, I will punish him and I will release him. There was nothing to their case, and I told them so. But to keep the peace, I'd have him beaten, because then they'd see he was punished. Jesus would think twice about stepping out of line again. The priests would be appeased. No reports of trouble would get back to Rome. And hopefully everyone would just go home. So I could have a nice, peaceful Friday. But that wasn't good enough for them. They wanted blood. They wanted death. The guy was clearly innocent, and they didn't care. Then I got a new idea. Every year, Jews from all over the world come to my territory to celebrate this thing they call Passover. Well, Passover was going to start the following day. Every year at the feast, I make it a practice to release one of their prisoners as a kind of a gesture of goodwill. This time, I would give them a choice. But one of those choices was going to be Jesus. This guy did not deserve what they wanted to do to him. But how could I get them to pick Jesus to be the one to be released? I would have to put him up against somebody who was really bad. So bad that they almost wouldn't have had a choice. And then I thought of Barabbas. Barabbas was a bad guy. Barabbas was a murderer. Barabbas was an insurrectionist. This guy was a guy who would have caused the Jews real problems. And I don't know a lot about their religion, but I knew they, like pretty much everybody else, had a law against murder. I gave them a choice, but there was no real choice. Surely they had to pick Jesus to be released. They didn't. They wanted me to release Barabbas and kill Jesus. Now think about that for a moment. What was the charge they brought against Jesus? They told me essentially he was an insurrectionist. I knew that was a crock, but that's what they said. They said he opposed Caesar. He was an insurrectionist. He was trying to cause problems for Rome. And so I put a real insurrectionist up against him. One who had committed murder. No one had ever accused Jesus of murder. And still, they picked Barabbas to be freed. If he had succeeded in his plan, Barabbas would have brought the weight of the Roman army against the Israelites, and it would have been over for them. But that's who they wanted free. And instead, they wanted to kill this man, Jesus, because of a religious disagreement. I don't understand these people. After they chose Barabbas, I said, what shall I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah? They all answered, crucify him. What a bloodthirsty mob they were. I found him innocent, and so did Herod, but they still wanted him dead. Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law, I told them. They said, but we have no right to execute anyone. There was only one outcome they would accept. This was very quickly getting out of control. So I took Jesus inside, and I tried to get some answers. I asked him again, are you the king of the Jews? This time he said, is that your own idea? Or did others talk to you about me? I have to tell you, I had had enough. I'm not a Jew. I'm not your enemy here. I was trying to save him. I was trying to keep this murderous mob from killing an innocent man. Because it wasn't just that they wanted. It wasn't just that they wanted to kill him. They wanted me to do it. They wanted me to do their dirty work. I told him, your own people and your chief priests handed you over to me. What is it that you have done? His answer was confusing. He said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place. Oh, so he does think he's a king, and then he has a kingdom. Maybe there is something to these charges after all. I said, so you're a king then? But then he said, you say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world was to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. I couldn't make heads or tails of this. This guy was innocent, and I knew it. But the people wanted me to release a murderer and kill this guy instead. His own people wanted this. The chief priests were saying all kinds of things about him. I knew none of it was true. But what was the truth? I didn't know who to believe. He said he came to testify to the truth. The chief priests would have also insisted that they spoke the truth. But what I have learned is, if two people are saying opposite things, and they both say that what they say is the truth, one of them is lying. I knew the chief priests were lying. And Jesus said, everyone on the side of truth listens to him. Could it be? I was so confused that I finally said, what is truth? This was getting me nowhere. So I went back out to the mob. They were still wanting Barabbas over Jesus. So I sent Jesus to be flogged. Surely that would appease the crowd. He was innocent. He didn't deserve it. But surely when they saw him beaten, they would have had mercy. They would have given up on the idea of killing him. When the soldiers brought him back from the flogging, he was almost unrecognizable. He was almost dead. They draped him in a royal robe, a robe that was now soaked in his blood. They jammed a crown of thorns on his head. And that was how I presented him to the crowd. Surely now the crowd would show him mercy, because the soldiers definitely didn't. I brought him out before them and said, here is the man. And the whole crowd, egged on by the chief priests, shouted, crucify, crucify. There was no mercy there. They all just wanted blood. I said, you take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him. And it was then that they said something that chilled me to the bone. We have a law. And according to the law, he must die. because he claimed to be the Son of God. Okay, let's start at the surface. Did you catch it? They changed the charge. A couple of minutes ago, they claimed I should kill him because he was an insurrectionist, opposing Caesar, opposing paying taxes, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I would actually care about. I knew that was not their true motivation. After all, when I gave them the opportunity to release a real bona fide insurrectionist and a murderer to boot, they jumped at the chance to let him go. So they don't have a real problem with insurrection, right? They can't have a problem with insurrection. But now they tell me that he said he was the Son of God. And that's why they want him dead. That's a religious dispute. And look, I don't really care about their religion with their one God. I'm not a Jew. I'm a Roman. I believe in many gods. What did they do? They clearly didn't believe him. But what if this Jesus really is the Son of God? That does fit in my worldview. I believe in many gods. There are stories from my religion of people who were children of the gods. Did they bring me a God? Did they want me to kill God? Because that's what the Son of God would be. He would be God. I knew I had to talk to him further. So I took him back inside. Which is kind of funny if you think about it. They would not enter my home for fear that I would make them unclean. But this guy, the guy they wanted to kill because he said he's the Son of God, he had no such fear. I asked him, "Where do you come from?" And he refused to answer me. I was getting scared. I needed to know. So I said, "Do you refuse to speak to me? Don't you realize that I have the power either to free you or crucify you? Look, buddy, I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to save you. Answer me." He said, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of the greater sin." My word, could it be? Could this be the Son of God? If he's right, any power I have is not my own. I'm part of something much bigger than myself. Could it be that I'm not really in power? Could it be that I'm just a witness? I have to free him. I can't let this happen. I have to try to stop it. I tried reasoning with them, but they just kept shouting, "Crucify, crucify, crucify." But I can't. I won't. The leaders of their mob shouted, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." Was that a threat? This Jesus doesn't oppose Caesar. I find no basis for that charge. But these guys don't care about truth. And it would not be beneath them to tell Caesar that I am a threat to his kingdom too. No friend to Caesar? People who are not Caesar's friends in my position end up dead. Oh, this is going badly. This is out of control. This is wrong. I didn't know what to do. This could cost me everything. This could cost me my life. I took Jesus and went to the stone pavement, to the judgment seat. I looked at the people and said, "Here is your king." And deep inside, I wondered if it might not be true. After all, he said everyone on the side of truth listens to him. And while I can't say I necessarily believed everything he said, he was a lot more believable than his opponents. All they did was yell, "Take him away! Take him away! Crucify him!" I couldn't believe what they were doing. No way was he guilty of the charges. I had to stop this. I said, "Shall I crucify your king?" The priest replied, "We have no king but Caesar." I said, "Why? What crime has he committed?" But they just kept shouting, "Crucify him! Crucify him! Crucify him!" I wanted to stop it, but I was powerless. This thing was bigger than me. It was getting out of control. If it got back to Caesar, it was over for me. especially if they lied and told Caesar that I was an enemy of the empire. I couldn't stop it. The die was cast. This was bigger than me, and I wanted no parts of it. Finally, I had my servant bring me a basin of water, and before the crowd, I washed my hands and said, I am innocent of this man's blood. It is your responsibility. You demanded this, not me. You wanted blood, you got it, but it's on you. Do you know what they said in return? His blood is on us and on our children. May that be the case. I freed Barabbas and sent Jesus to the cross. Earlier that morning, my wife sent me a note. Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, it said, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him. When am I going to listen to her? And there ends the story. At least that's the story as I see it, trying to read from Pilate's perspective. There are parts of 5 chapters in the Bible, one in each of the synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and 2 chapters in John. I used elements from each of those to put them together as best I could. It's so amazing when you think about it. Think about the opposition that Jesus faced. They accused Jesus of being an insurrectionist and then released an actual insurrectionist in his place. It also strikes me that the chief priests could not be bothered to investigate Jesus' claim that he was the Son of God. But when the pagan Pilate heard the claim, he investigated it at once. Think about it. Pilate was a Roman. They believed in many gods, gods that interacted with people. The idea that someone could be the Son of God almost didn't seem far-fetched to him. In a way, he actually seemed more able to believe Jesus than the ones who should have been looking for him. Let's key in on a few verses from Matthew's account. Pilate gave them the choice, Jesus or Barabbas. Matthew 27:17. So when the crowd had gathered, Pilate asked them, which one do you want me to release to you, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Messiah? Jesus told them the truth. He was the Messiah, the long-awaited king. Now, admittedly, the Jewish leaders didn't believe he was the Messiah. But if they had investigated his claims in the Word, they would have seen the truth. And that Word is still as vital today and much more available than it was then. They were given the choice between Messiah and murderer, and they chose murderer. Why did they make that choice? Pilate knew. The pagan governor could see what the people who were supposed to be the men of God missed. Matthew 27:18. For he knew it was out of self-interest that they had handed Jesus over to him. They didn't care about the truth. They wanted what they wanted. And if Jesus would not give them what they wanted, Jesus had to go. I mean, they really did. They changed the charge against Jesus for the sole purpose of getting Pilate to do their dirty work. We see this behavior several times in Scripture. And this is a takeaway for all of us. The religious leaders were trying to pressure Pilate to make a rash decision so that they could get him to do the wrong thing. Something that served their purposes and not his. Even to the point of threatening him by saying if he didn't do what they wanted, he was no friend of Caesar. And so it is with us. People who try to pressure you into making a rash decision do not necessarily have your best interests at heart. They often merely want to manipulate you into doing what works for them. And it's even better if they can make you get your hands dirty and they don't have to get their hands dirty. Of course, Pilate was warned. Verse 19. While Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him this message. Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him. Men, I know we are supposed to be the spiritual heads of our households. We are. And we dare not shirk that responsibility. But Your wife is a gift from God. And if she has a sense about something, if she is a praying person and something doesn't feel right to her, do yourself a favor, listen to her. At least consider what she has to say. You may have the final decision, but that decision affects both of you because you're one. Think of all the struggles that Pilate might have avoided if he had taken his wife seriously that day. Matthew 27:20. But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus executed. So the religious leaders goaded the people into doing what was the wrong thing. Folks, we have to be careful who we follow. These guys may have been widely respected, and they did play right into God's hand in what they did, but they were not following the Lord, and they were not following the word. We have been given the word, and we are responsible for following it. And if a leader, even me, stops following the Lord, stops following his word, do not follow that person. My prayer as a leader is that I would always follow and be able to say what Paul said, which is this. 1 Corinthians 11:1. Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. And if I'm not following the example of Christ, please do not follow me. So we know what happened here. Matthew 27, starting with 21. Which of the two do you want me to release to you? Asked the governor. Barabbas, they answered. What shall I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah? Pilate asked. They all answered, crucify him. Why? What crime has he committed? Asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, crucify him. This is sort of like the comedian George Carlin used to say. Never underestimate the power of stupid people in large groups. These people had been led astray, and they ended up screaming for the death of the one that had some of them saying, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, just 5 days before. They had been led astray, and they were in grave danger of staying astray. Pilate was not falling for it. He knew the chief priests were up to no good. He knew he couldn't stop it, but neither was he going to be a part of it. He was not going to have blood on his hands if he could help it. What was happening was wrong, and he knew it. He wanted no parts of it. Verse 24, when Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. I am innocent of this man's blood. He said, it is your responsibility. When we read this story, the story of Pilate, one thing we see is him over and over again trying to release Jesus. It almost makes one wonder if he was starting to believe. In my study, I found this. Due to the gospel's portrayal of Pilate as a reluctant to execute Jesus, the Ethiopian church believes that Pilate became a Christian and venerates him both as martyr and saint, a belief which is historically shared by the Coptic church. Is it true? I don't know. I pray it is. But then that's my prayer for everyone, that all would come to the foot of the cross and come to know Jesus as Lord and Savior and be saved. Which brings us to Matthew 15:25. Reading this verse almost makes it sound like somebody wised up. Even if that's not the case, my prayer is that it came to pass for many of them. Verse 25 says this, all the people answered, his blood is on us and on our children. Now maybe they were just claiming credit for what they did that day, but I hope it was something more. Because you see, his blood wasn't just on them. It was on every person who has ever sinned. See, it wasn't the Jews who killed Jesus. It was us. It wasn't just the Romans who put him on a cross. It was us. It wasn't just the nails that held him to the cross. It was his love for us. If we will trust in Jesus, if we will believe, his blood is on us. may it also be on our children. And that blood washes us clean. May it be so. May we all be found under the blood. Amen.